A recent study revealed a staggering statistic. Nearly three-quarters of teenagers raised in a faith-based home abandon that foundation by the time they enter college. Think about that. The values, the principles, the very bedrock you've tried to build for them, washed away by the first wave of cultural pressure. Why? Because we have become masters of building external success while neglecting the internal architecture of the mind. I've seen it, and I've lived it. I spent the first half of my life in the tech world, a gladiator in the digital arena. I built companies. I amassed wealth. I won the game I was told to play. And on the inside, I was a ghost. My internal state was a chaotic storm of anxiety and reaction, completely dependent on the stock market, the latest product launch, or the approval of others. My success was a skyscraper built on quicksand. My crucible came in the form of a burnout so severe it nearly cost me everything. Stripped of my titles and my health, I was forced to confront the man I had become. A reactor, not a creator. It was in that abyss that I stopped looking for the next business strategy and started looking for a timeless operating system for the human mind. I found it in the Stoics, in the relentless logic of Epictetus, a slave who was mentally freer than any emperor, and in the private reflections of Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world who journaled daily to fortify his own soul against the chaos of his position. Today, we are not just talking about parenting. We are talking about forging a legacy. The world your children are inheriting is more volatile, more distracting, and more philosophically empty than ever before. Mainstream parenting advice, with its emphasis on frictionless comfort and the relentless pursuit of fleeting happiness, is not just failing, it is actively weakening them. It is preparing them for a world that does not exist. Today, I will give you a different path. We will explore 4 principles to transform your role from a modern parent into an ancient guide. You will learn how to stop raising fragile children and start forging resilient adults. Warriors with an inner peace so profound, so unshakable, that no cultural storm can ever extinguish their light. This is not about what to think, it's about how to think. It's about building an inner citadel within your children, a fortress of reason and virtue that will stand long after you are gone. Are you merely trying to make your children happy, or are you committed to making them strong? The answer to that question will define their future. Let's be brutally honest about the battlefield your children are navigating every single day. It is a war for their attention, their values, and their very identity. This is not a physical battlefield of swords and shields, but a psychological one, and the weapons are far more insidious. Social media algorithms are designed by the sharpest minds of a generation with a single purpose: to addict. They create a constant stream of comparison, outrage, and manufactured desire, rewiring the neural pathways of a developing brain to crave external validation above all else. A mentee of mine, a brilliant executive, recently confessed to me the struggle he was having with his 14-year-old daughter. She was a bright, kind girl, but she had become a shell of herself, her mood entirely dictated by the number of likes on her latest post. She was living in a digital coliseum, performing for an invisible, anonymous crowd, and the stress was breaking her. Her father's attempts to help were met with anger because he was trying to take away the very thing that had hijacked her sense of self-worth. This digital chaos is compounded by a cultural narrative that has abandoned objective truth in favor of radical relativism, the idea that every person's truth is equally valid. Our educational systems, once tasked with teaching critical thinking, now often promote a doctrine of feelings over facts. This creates a generation that is not only unable to defend a logical position, but is offended by the very idea that a stronger, more reasoned position might exist. They are being taught to build their identity on the shifting sands of emotion rather than the bedrock of principle. This is the intellectual equivalent of sending a soldier into battle with armor made of paper. When their feelings are inevitably challenged by the harsh realities of the world, they have no defense. They crumble. This is why the prevailing models of gentle, accommodating parenting are so dangerous. They are a peacetime strategy for a time of war. By shielding children from every discomfort, by negotiating every boundary, and by prioritizing their immediate happiness over their long-term character, we are robbing them of the crucial experiences needed to develop resilience. I learned this the hard way in my first company. I had a young, promising engineer who was brilliant but brittle. I protected him, made excuses for his missed deadlines, and shielded him from client frustrations. I thought I was being a supportive mentor. In reality, I was his greatest enemy. The first time a major project fell on his shoulders and I wasn't there to run interference, he collapsed under the pressure. He quit within a week. I didn't prepare him for reality, I prepared him for a fantasy. What hard truth about the modern world are you currently shielding your child from, believing you are protecting them when you are in fact weakening them? So, we must reframe our mission. You are not a manager of your child's happiness. You are the architect of their character. Your role is not to clear the path of all obstacles, but to build the strength within them to surmount any obstacle the path presents. This requires a countercultural mindset, a warrior's discipline. It means you must be willing to be unpopular with your children at times because you are playing a long game. Their immediate approval is a fleeting currency. Their future resilience is the eternal gold you are helping them mint. You must become the calm, unwavering lighthouse in the storm of their emotional and cultural world. This is not about being authoritarian or unloving. It is the highest form of love. It is the love that says, I care more about the adult you will become in 20 years than the fleeting comfort you want right now. This shift begins with a fundamental principle from Stoic philosophy, perhaps the most important tool for navigating life's chaos, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, the former slave I mentioned, taught that the foundation of all tranquility lies in understanding the difference between what is within our power and what is not. What is within our power? Our judgments, our impulses, our attitudes, our responses. In short, our own mind. What is not within our power? Everything else. The opinions of others, the state of the economy, the actions of our children, the outcome of their choices. The modern parent is driven to madness by trying to control the uncontrollable. They try to manufacture outcomes, perfect grades, social popularity, a life without pain. This is a recipe for anxiety and frustration for both parent and child. Your task is to model this principle relentlessly. When your teenager comes home, distraught because they weren't invited to a party, the typical reaction is to either share in their outrage or try to fix it. The Stoic response is different. It is to first manage your own reaction, to remain a pillar of calm. Then you guide them with questions. You feel hurt. That is understandable. Is the person who threw the party within your control? Is their opinion of you within your control? No. So what is? How you respond to this feeling? How you choose to spend your evening? The character you build from this moment of disappointment. Let's focus there. You are teaching them to redirect their energy from the turbulent, uncontrollable external world to the firm, controllable ground of their own mind. You are giving them the master key to unlocking their own peace. This is the first and most critical step in raising a warrior. The warrior's primary battle is not with the world, but with their own untamed mind. When was the last time you were frustrated by something you could not control? How can you apply this lesson not just to your child, but to your own life, starting today? The second Stoic foundation you must lay is the practice of emotional regulation. Children do not learn what we say, they learn what we are. You can give them 1,000 lectures on the importance of calm, but if you react with explosive anger when someone cuts you off in traffic, you have taught them that emotional control is a theory, not a practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This wasn't a platitude for him, it was an active, daily exercise. As the Emperor of Rome, he was surrounded by betrayal, incompetence, and constant crisis. His power came not from his throne, but from his ability to insert a space between an event and his reaction to it. In that space lies our freedom and our strength. Your home must be a training ground for this practice. Let me give you a concrete example from my own life after I began applying these principles. I had a son who, as a teenager, went through a period of intense rebellion. One evening, he came home well past his curfew, and I could tell immediately he had been drinking. The old me, the reactive CEO, would have met him with a barrage of anger. My heart would have been pounding with fear and rage, and I would have unleashed a torrent of accusations and punishments, escalating the situation into a shouting match that solved nothing and only deepened the divide between us. That night, I did something different. When he walked in, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but I paused. I took a breath. I focused on what I could control, my own response. Instead of yelling, I looked at him calmly and said, "I'm glad you're home. You're late, and it's clear you've made a poor decision tonight. We will discuss this tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. in my study. Go to bed." The effect was stunning. He was prepared for a fight, armed with excuses and defiance. My calm completely disarmed him. The next morning, the conversation was not about my anger, but about his choices and their consequences. It was a discussion, not a diatribe. I modeled for him that crisis is not a time for panic, but for deliberate, reasoned action. This is what it means to lead. You must become the thermostat for your family's emotional climate, not the thermometer. The thermometer simply reflects the temperature in the room, the thermostat sets it. Your calm is a gift to your children. It creates the psychological safety for them to make mistakes, to fail, and to learn, knowing that they will be met not with chaos, but with strength. What is one recurring situation in your family life that triggers your own emotional reactivity? How could you, like Marcus Aurelius, create a space between that trigger and your response? Once you have established the dichotomy of control and the practice of modeling emotional regulation, you can begin to explicitly teach your children the art of resilience. This isn't about giving them motivational speeches, it's about systematically training their minds to view obstacles not as threats, but as opportunities. Seneca, a Stoic advisor to the Emperor Nero, often spoke of the premeditation of evils, or premeditatio malorum. This is the practice of visualizing potential setbacks and challenges in advance. Not to create anxiety, but to strip them of their power to surprise and shock you. A modern athlete does this. They don't just visualize winning. They visualize a bad call from the referee, an injury, or a moment of fatigue, and they mentally rehearse their calm, effective response. You can adapt this for your children. Before a big exam, you can sit with them and ask, "What's the worst that could happen? You could fail the test. Okay, let's play that out. What would we do?" We would talk to the teacher, figure out what you didn't understand, and make a plan to study better next time. You would survive. The world wouldn't end. By walking through the worst-case scenario, you rob it of its terror. You are teaching them that failure is not an identity, it is simply an event, a piece of data from which to learn. This practice transforms fear of the unknown into a manageable, solvable problem. It builds an anti-fragile mind, a mind that doesn't just withstand shocks but actually gets stronger from them. A mentee of mine, the founder of a successful software company, applied this principle with his son who had severe anxiety about playing in competitive sports. The boy was talented but would freeze up during games, terrified of making a mistake. His father stopped giving him pep talks about winning. Instead, they started a new pre-game ritual. They would sit in the car and talk about all the things that could go wrong. You might miss the game-winning shot. The coach might yell at you. A teammate might get angry. For each possibility, they role-played a constructive response. The focus shifted from controlling the outcome to controlling his actions. Within a few months, the boy's anxiety plummeted. He started playing with a freedom he'd never had before because he was no longer afraid of the consequences of failure. He was prepared for them. Are you teaching your children to fear failure? Or are you giving them the tools to metabolize it into fuel for growth? Think of a specific fear your child has. How could you use this premeditation practice to help them confront and neutralize it? Now, it is remarkable how this ancient Stoic framework aligns with the core virtues found in other timeless wisdom traditions. The Stoics were not alone in their quest to define the good life and build unshakable character. While their path was through pure reason, we see a profound parallel in the ethical teachings of Judeo-Christian scripture. One should not be afraid to draw wisdom from multiple wells. As a philosopher, I study the architecture of strong ideas, wherever they may be found. The Stoic cardinal virtues are wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Look at how these resonate with the instructions found in ancient biblical texts. Proverbs 22:6 states, "Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it." This is not about indoctrination. It is about the rigorous daily training of character, identical to the Stoic emphasis on practice over theory. Furthermore, consider the alignment on handling adversity. Seneca famously said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." He saw adversity as the necessary forge for virtue. This echoes the sentiment in the Christian tradition, which speaks of suffering producing endurance and endurance producing character. The modern parenting instinct is to build a bubble-wrapped world for our children, to shield them from all hardship. This is a profound mistake. It is an attempt to create a world without a forge, and the result is not a strong sword, but a piece of soft, untempered iron. When God, or the Logos, or the universe, whatever language you choose for the organizing principle of reality, allows adversity into your child's life, your job is not always to intervene. It is to be the master blacksmith, standing by to help them use the fire and the hammer to shape themselves into something stronger. A practical way to integrate this is through stories. Our brains are wired for narrative. Don't just lecture on courage, tell the story of David facing Goliath, and then dissect it. It wasn't just about faith, it was about an objective assessment of the situation. David, an expert with a slingshot, recognized he had a tactical advantage at a distance. He controlled what he could control, his skill, his weapon, his position, and refused to be intimidated by what he couldn't, Goliath's size and armor. Or tell them the story of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, who focused on excellence and integrity in every situation, no matter how dire, eventually rising to a position of immense power. These are not just religious tales, they are masterclasses in Stoic resilience. They demonstrate that virtue is not a feeling, but a choice, made over and over again, especially when it is most difficult. In what ways have you been prioritizing your child's comfort over their character? What is one safe struggle you can allow them to face this week to begin building their strength? Let's translate this philosophy into practical, on-the-ground warrior training. Theory is useless without application. The first strategy is to establish and hold consistent boundaries that are explicitly linked to virtue. Most parenting arguments devolve into a battle of wills. Because I said so. This teaches nothing. Instead, frame your boundaries around the virtues you are trying to build. When you set a limit on screen time, the explanation isn't because it's bad for you. It is. We are a family that values real-world creation over passive consumption. We practice the virtue of temperance, of self-control. Your mind is your most valuable asset, and we are going to train it to focus, not to be endlessly distracted. The boundary is no longer an arbitrary rule, it's a part of your family's identity, a code of conduct for the warriors you are raising. Second, use natural consequences, not arbitrary punishments. A punishment is often about venting your own frustration. A consequence is about teaching responsibility. If your son, after being reminded, forgets his soccer cleats, The temptation is to rush back home to get them, all while delivering a furious lecture. This teaches him that his irresponsibility is your problem. The warrior training approach is to let the natural consequence occur. He has to explain to his coach and teammates why he can't play. The sting of that embarrassment is a far more effective teacher than your anger ever could be. It connects his action directly to an undesirable outcome, engraving the lesson in his mind. I once had a junior partner in my firm who made a significant error on a client proposal because he rushed his work. My instinct was to fix it myself before the client saw it. Instead, I had him make the call to the client, explain his mistake, and detail how he was going to rectify it. It was a brutal call for him, but I can guarantee you he never made that kind of sloppy mistake again. The pain of the consequence was the price of a priceless lesson in diligence. Third, you must deliberately introduce controlled adversity. We have to let our children fail in safe and recoverable ways. This could be encouraging them to take on a project that is just outside their current abilities, like building something complex or starting a small neighborhood business. You are there as a guide, but you do not provide the answers. You let them wrestle with the problem, get frustrated, and experience the immense satisfaction of figuring it out for themselves. This is how you build true self-esteem, not by telling them they are great, but by creating an environment where they can prove it to themselves. Finally, instill the practice of service and gratitude. Take them to serve at a homeless shelter or help an elderly neighbor. This punctures the bubble of self-absorption that modern culture promotes. It teaches them perspective, humility, and the Stoic truth that a meaningful life is found not in what you get, but in what you give. Which of these 4 strategies, virtue-based boundaries, natural consequences, controlled adversity, or service, is most lacking in your current parenting approach? We have journeyed through the battlefield of modern culture. We have laid the philosophical foundations of the Stoics, and we have translated those ancient principles into concrete strategies. Let's bring it all together. You are not just raising your child, you are forging the future. The chaos, the distractions, the shallow values of the world are not going away. You cannot change the storm, but you can, and you must, build an unbreachable harbor in the mind of your child. This is your great and noble work. Let's recap the mission. First, you must see the world for what it is and reframe your role from a manager of happiness to an architect of character. Second, you must master the dichotomy of control in your own life, focusing your energy only on what is yours to command: your responses, your principles, your example. Third, you must model emotional regulation, becoming the calm, steady lighthouse your family needs. And fourth, you must train them like the warriors they are meant to be, using virtue-based boundaries, natural consequences, controlled adversity, and a commitment to service. This is not the easy path. It requires more discipline, more patience, and more courage from you than any other parenting philosophy. It demands that you work on yourself more than you work on your child. The world is full of victims, people who believe they are at the mercy of their circumstances and their feelings. Do not let your children be among them. Give them the ultimate inheritance, an iron mind, an internal citadel that allows them to remain calm in crisis, virtuous under pressure, and purposeful in a world that has lost its way. This is your legacy. It will not be measured in the money or possessions you leave behind, but in the strength of character that lives on in your children and your children's children. Here is my challenge to you. Choose one strategy we discussed today. Just one. Whether it's letting a natural consequence play out for the first time, or having a deliberate conversation about controlling one's reactions. Commit to implementing it this week. Do not just think about it, act on it. And when you do, come back to this video and share your experience in the comments. Let's build a community of parents committed to this warrior path. Your story will encourage someone else. Raise warriors, not victims. Your legacy is built at home, one deliberate choice at a time.